it's good that they don't attack us. No, seriously, we're just eating.
If I was to tell you over the past 2 weeks that Paris has been ripped and torn apart by violent riots, your confusion could be forgiven because the mainstream media's silence on this issue has been absolutely deafening. If you type Paris riots 2017 into Google and search by news, what you're faced with is quite frankly a pathetic lack of news sources describing exactly what's going on. You have to get past the first page to even find a comment by the BBC on it. So why is the mainstream media ignoring this issue totally? Well, it's very obvious to me why they're doing it, and it's probably very obvious to you as well, but let's go through it. Now, France is no stranger to riots. In fact, you could probably say that the birth of modern France came about essentially because of huge massive riots. But nowadays it seems like France can't go a week without being involved in some sort of national turmoil. I've lost count of how many demonstrations suddenly turn violent in the centre of Paris. But yet the media always manages to brush it under the carpet and we move on with our lives until 2 weeks later when it happens again. These riots are different because these riots are a symptom of modern France. These riots do nothing but identify and amplify the huge failures of the European Union and the current ruling establishment. The current riots were inspired when a young black man named Theo was allegedly anally raped by police when he was getting arrested. The police involved, as far as I can tell, have been charged independently and that'll be resolved internally, I imagine. But of course it didn't take long for this issue to be turned into a political football. Now suddenly France is a racist country and the police are nothing more than a white supremacist Nazi hit squad, who no doubt target black people just because they're black. We've heard this narrative before, haven't we? Now people are using this isolated incident to go out into the streets and cause utter chaos. Burning cars, burning down buildings, smashing businesses, attacking police officers, attacking innocent people, you name it, it's happening. But these protests, despite what the liberal media will tell you, are not about police brutality. They're not about this young man, Theo, who was attacked by police officers. These rioters don't give a shit about that incident. These riots remind me very much of the Mark Duggan incident in London in 2011, where a man was shot dead by police during a raid. What followed was mass rioting and looting in the streets of London, supposedly protesting police brutality. They had nothing to do with police brutality. People saw an opportunity to go outside, cause trouble and steal a new TV for themselves, and they took it. They just used that incident as a front. And that's similar to what's going on here in Paris. But why is the media silent? Well, there's the small matter of the French presidential election coming up. And as of now, Marine Le Pen is leading in the polls. In fact, these violent riots have only improved her polling position amongst French people. According to many reports, she's on course to win the first round of voting and then lose in the second round. Lose comfortably in the second round, they say, which I don't believe for a damn second. These riots and the social problems that France are having right now play straight into Marine Le Pen's hands. The total and complete failure of the European Union's migrant policy is for all to see right now. It's wide out in the open, Marine Le Pen has talked about it for years, and these riots only prove her point. It's no surprise that the majority of these rioters come from immigrant communities. France, along with many other countries in the European Union, I'm looking at you Germany, have completely failed to integrate their large migrant numbers. Hundreds of thousands of migrants come into Europe every single year. There is no way that the European Union can integrate all these people at once. It's impossible. What then happens, of course, is migrants form their own isolated communities on the outskirts of big cities, such as Paris. Integration is nigh on impossible at this point. This is a failure from the top down from the heads of the European Union. I look at a guy like President Hollande and I just see weakness. I just see total lack of strength, total lack of conviction, a complete puppet of the European Union. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a weaker leader, ever. Look at him here at this photo op with Theo, the guy who was allegedly attacked by the police. What this man should be doing at this point in time is showing strength and telling these rioters, no, stop it now. Stop it now, or you know what, face the consequences of it. Le Pen has of course seized this opportunity to call out the paralysis of the current French government, and she's absolutely right. The French government at this point in time are doing very, very little to stop this bullshit. And it's no surprise people like the BBC, CNN and their like aren't commenting on this matter, because they know that if they draw attention to the horrible situation that is Paris and France in general at this point, it'll only garner sympathy for Marine Le Pen and her message. They know this, and their tactic right now is just to say nothing. But what they don't realise is that's even worse. Like I said, their silence is absolutely deafening. People hear about riots in Paris and like, well, I haven't seen anything on the news, what's going on? So they Google it and they see all this stuff, and the BBC are absolutely nowhere to be seen. What do you think the French people are thinking right now? As they see their once great capital city, the city of love, burning to the ground, overrun with scum. What do you think they're thinking? You know, we can joke about the French however much we want, but at the end of the day, when they realise they can't have their 3-hour lunch breaks in their favourite restaurant because their favourite restaurant has been burnt to the ground, they may sit back and think, you know what, fuck this, I'm voting for Le Pen. And they should vote for her, because she's the only politician in France at this point who's showing any modicum of strength. Just today, here's a news story about Marine Le Pen, who was going to meet Lebanon's Grand Mufti, right? Marine Le Pen, who is currently running for president in France, cancelled a meeting with Lebanon's Grand Mufti after refusing to wear a headscarf for the occasion. The far-right leader told reporters, "You can pass on my respects to the Grand Mufti, but I will not cover myself up." The Grand Mufti's press conference said that her aides had told her prior to the meeting that they required her to wear a head covering for the meeting. Shortly after she arrived at his office, one of his aides tried to give her a headscarf to put on. She refused and said she had met in the past with the Grand Mufti of Egypt's Al-Azhar, hope I'm saying that right, one of the world's top Sunni clerics, without wearing a veil. Once she was told that customs are different in Lebanon, Le Pen walked towards her car and left. This is the sort of strength that French people want to see. They don't want to see their leaders bending over backwards for these Muslim clerics. Similarly, they don't want to see their capital city bending over to their Muslim migrants. Multiculturalism hasn't worked. Mass immigration hasn't worked. Integration for this mass migration definitely hasn't worked. The mainstream media are terrified of these populist surges that are happening all over the world. We had Brexit in the UK, we had Donald Trump in America, in France we have Le Pen, in the Netherlands we have Geert Wilders. They don't want to draw attention to any of this because they're so involved with the current political establishment. In the UK during Brexit we had constant stories of doom and gloom if we voted to leave the European Union, how we'd fall off the edge of the earth, how Armageddon would take place and how we'd all die horrible deaths in poverty. And now they're set to lose France and probably the Netherlands too. But this populist surge can't be stopped. I fully expect Marine Le Pen to win the presidency in France, and even if she doesn't win, it'll be by a very narrow margin. But even if she does lose, I think she'll win in the long term because whoever they elect instead of her will fail so terribly that France will be in an even worse position than it is now when the next election rolls around. These riots are just a symptom of a terrible disease that's plagued Europe for decades. And while I won't go as far to say that Marine Le Pen is the antidote to this disease, she's at least a weapon the public can use to fight it. The French and the people of Europe are turning to politicians to at least show public strength in cases of crisis. People like Merkel have failed, people like Hollande have failed, and people like Marine Le Pen, while she biologically doesn't have a pair, is showing some balls on this issue.